Adrenaline Radio. My name is Fred Blanchard, host of Adrenaline Motorsports on 1680 AM on your dial. This evening we have an in-studio guest, Gary Richards from Bonneville fame, and we're going to have some conversation with him and regarding projects and when everything started in the early years of land speed racing. The uniqueness of our guest tonight is that it wasn't a four-wheel vehicle that he ran. It was a motorcycle, too. The motorcycles were the thing that you guys chose to run, and and that in itself is unique. And how did you figure out which way to lay down face forward or sit back and like a car? How did you go about designing that idea? How did you come up with your plan to do that?
Well, there were some that laid down on their stomach facing forward. I just thought, if this thing goes airborne and lands on its nose, I don't want my head to be out there in the front of the thing. So I chose to sit most like a car would, kind of laying on your back with your head popped up a bit out of the shell with a roll bar and a canopy over you.
Who created all this driveline? I mean, I've seen some photos of what you've shown, and of course, it didn't come out of Lockheed, but it came out a functional idea. I know that. I'm looking at what you guys did here.
Well, it was just looking at what the car guys did and some of the motorcycle guys did. You just learn and mimic, and I'm sure some of it was just innovative. You have a certain amount of space to put the motor and transmission, two wheels and driver out of something 13 feet long. So it was just kind of maybe serendipity design, maybe hopefully just on a creative end, we just did as best we could.
How did you generate a crew? Now, you say this motorcycle was 13 foot long in length, was it?
That's true. That's true. I just, my pit crew consisted one of my old high school buddy in Oregon who ended up being my partner in the project. I pretty much had the chassis done and the shell on its way, and he was a body and fender guy, and it was pretty creative, and he wanted to get involved, so he finished up the body and put the canopy on it, and we ran his engine the first year. We weren't very successful. It was a very wet year, and went through the first light at the traps, and before I got to the second one, I was on my head, went through upside down, and missed the second light.
Well, Gary, what I'd like to do is go back a little bit before your involvement. I'd like to talk a little bit about some of the things that you learned from your dad and your involvement with your dad, and what kind of a mentor you felt he was, or some people are mentors, and other people they don't have the patience to be a mentor. So, but I wanted to touch bases with some of the things that he had achieved and how you got involved and what you learned from your experience hanging around him and in the early stages of your, which became later automotive career here in some of these areas.
Dad was always involved in mechanics, and obviously that rubbed off on me. He ran at the Muroc Dry Lakes and in Harper Dry Lake back in the 30s.
Were there clubs in those days?
There certainly was. He was a charter member of the Sidewinders.
Well, that's a club today as well.
Yeah, and I understand he ran under other club banners, and I guess folks did that just to be able to run. Not that they jumped ship particularly, but I think you just paid your dues and ran that day under whatever flag that was. But he was the first 1932 Ford to break 100. He went 104 miles an hour with a stock Deuce Roadster. I believe that was 1938. In 1938, he also ran what we think was an old Indianapolis car with the Dixon overhead conversion. What he won top time of the day, 120 miles per hour.
Well, that leads me to ask this next question. Do you recall the source of the car, how it came about, or is it something that he just happened about? I mean, because I know guys started thinking about aerodynamics in those days, and the car that I see in some of the photos that you've shared with me had some of that available to it, even though the wheels were exposed. It was a pretty lean-looking body, and it had a tail on it, and that kind of thing. And but the motor was up front, and it resembled, like you say, styled after an Indianapolis-style car. But you don't know if it was designed in that manner by your dad, or was this something he acquired from a couple of guys, or how did that come about?
Well, as I understand, he drove the car and tuned the car. I've been researching for probably the last 12, 15 years, trying to find a little more history of the car. There's rumors that the guy Dixon built 4 different prototype engines, trying to get a large lumber company to buy his cylinder heads. He did these prototypes, trying to get them to decide on which would work best for their application. They were running heavy loads of lumber from the harbor up to L.A. and burning up their flathead motors. So
is this now being flathead motor? You're referring to the Ford flathead, correct?
Correct. The V8 Ford flathead.
It was a V8 Ford flathead.
Right,
okay,
correct.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that we'll get to here in a little bit. But so your dad actually is from motorcycles. He went to cars, but
that was just the opposite. He was in cars originally, and then went to motorcycles.
Oh, I see. Okay.